Great, Netflix. Now I want to watch Friday the 13th. Way to go. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Justin. Here we focus on your favorite content from streaming services and in theaters. Today we're going to be talking about the newest Netflix film, Fear Street Part 2, 1978. This is the second film in the Fear Street trilogy on Netflix. Next week we'll conclude with the third film, Part 3, 1666. This is based off of an R.L. Stine book series. Question of the video: what other Fear Street novels would you like to be seen turned into movies? I was really looking forward to this movie after watching the trailer for this after the most recent one, and the overall vibe that I got from that was like Friday the 13th, kind of like that 70s style slasher, and I absolutely love slasher movies. The older the better, and I think they're just really enjoyable. And this film gave off those vibes perfectly, and I absolutely loved it. From the camp to the costumes to the morals of the teenagers to everything that was going on in the film just screamed a 70s style slasher film that felt very reminiscent of Friday the 13th. And that vibe was very strong throughout. And it did continue a lot of that story from the first film. What I think this film does fairly well is it's trying to kind of juggle a lot. It's trying to answer questions we had from the first film, 1994. So it's kind of connecting both, while also setting up new things that we're going to get answers to in 1666. So not only is it giving us answers, it's also giving us new questions, connecting the dots between the first film and the second film, while also giving us new questions that we're going to probably get answered in the third film. So it's doing a good job of answering questions and also giving us more to think about. And I think that connection between both are very strong, and I can't wait to see that connection for the third film as well. In the film, we are introduced to Ziggy, played by Sadie Sink. She's bullied by campers and citizens of Sunnyvale to the point where they call her a witch and try to burn her arm. And her older sister is a camp counselor, Cindy, played by Emily Rudd. She doesn't really help her out in the beginning of the film, and Ziggy is frustrated with a lot of things, and she's not really getting any help from camp counselors. They kind of blame her for certain things, and Sadie Sink delivers a really good performance in here, and so does Emily Rudd. I think the sister story is very compelling compared to the stories we did get for 1994, because it does feel personal between the two. You can tell that there is kind of a personal story between the two, some frustration, and that leads for a nice progression of these characters, these sisters, in a progression of their story as they're further into the night, encountering all of these killers throughout the night, and it really challenges them to kind of work together and put aside their differences. A lot of these characters have flaws, and they use that as an advantage to kind of further the story. We also are introduced to Alice, who's played by Ryan Simpkins, who is an old friend of Cindy's and Cindy's ex and Cindy's boyfriend Tommy in the film. All of these characters really do fit the kind of 70s style of slasher film. Some of them are sexually active, some of them just want to explore the camp and then run into problems. The kind of structure of the story feels very familiar. It's also focusing on the witch that was introduced in the first film, so I love that continuation of that story. And also the beginning of this film is a continuation of the end of the first film, and then they're telling the story and then it goes back to 74. So the continuation of that witch's story and who is being possessed by the witch is something really entertaining. And once again, this is a bloody film. A little more bloody and gruesome than the first film. I think they're kind of adding on more gruesome scenes with each movie, and I'm really excited for the third film. But there are some really creative kills in here. It gets very bloody at times. It just shows how relentless this witch is. It does feel like a really good slasher film, and that vibe of like Friday the 13th really fits this nicely. Much like 1994, when we are introduced to some new characters and there's some backstories surrounding the witch and they're reading books and kind of giving us all the information we need, It's a little bit sluggish at times. We learn a lot in 1994 about the witch, and when we are being reintroduced to it in the new film, it's not as impactful because we already know who the witch is and what the witch can do. So when these characters are discovering the witch and the witch's abilities and who's being possessed, they are reacting in the most sensible way. And we are just kind of like, whatever, because we already know what's going to happen. We already know who the witch is. This also has a killer soundtrack with Carry On My Wayward Son playing occasionally throughout the film to really amplify certain scenes. The color, the costumes, the setting, it all really gives off that vibe that I absolutely love. Good continuation of the Fear Street trilogy. The discovery of the witch, I didn't think was as impactful as the first one because we already knew all the information. But the vibe, the kills, the compelling story between the two sisters is what carried this film. I'm going to go ahead and give Fear Street Part 2 a B+. Thank you guys for checking my review for the second film in the Fear Street trilogy. Next week it ends with 1666. Stay tuned for my review for that. My name is Just Watches Movies, and you guys stay classy, YouTube.